second presentation, we have Viktorija Rimaitė. I will not attempt to pronounce the second last name because, yeah. But she is an assistant professor in Vilnius University. She is dealing with political science and with memory studies, and with the role of artistic practices in political knowledge creation. And her main specialization is the analysis of memory processes and expressions of collective memory as politically significant objects, and focusing especially in public spaces. And so the title of her presentation is Monuments in Lithuania, Shaping State Identity. And well, maybe I will just quickly say that she and Federico are working together, but you can also talk a little bit more about that yourselves during your presentation. But please, Viktorija.
Good evening, colleagues. Thank you very much for the invitation and for introducing me. And today I just want to invite you to pay your attention how interdisciplinary connections between semiotics and political science can help in contemporary monument analysis, specifically in the field of political science. And here I would like to mention a very important aspect. I'm not a pure semiotician, so forgive me if something does not follow strict semiotic rules. In political science and political science researchers, we often do not have any tools to allow us to analyze visual objects, visual artifacts. So today I will try to show how the application or the integration of semiotics serves specifically in the study of monuments in the field of political science. So firstly, let's just take a quick look at the importance of collective memory in relationship with monuments. There are no doubts that one and very important way to understand state's identity is through the process of forgetting and remembering. Things, events, personalities that we need to remember or forget are important for statehood. In other words, they are related to a certain collective images of a state and a world around it. And these collective images are often represented, shaped, or affirmed on collective memory and its practices, including monuments as well. Monuments can be practices through which state identity is represented, created, and revealed. In this context, an analysis of monumental practices reveals that the debate about monuments is primarily shaped by political factors. But the question is how to read monuments from political science perspective. Not being pure semiotician, I usually form the research strategy from discourse analysis of existing documents and use a little semiotic analysis of discursive level of monuments in general and their figurative and thematic aspects in particular. Political science often lack tools for visual analysis, and there is a place where semiotics can be very, very useful and effective. And now I want to promote Federico Bellantani's book, The Meaning of Built Environment. I don't want to repeat it because you can read a lot for yourself, but what I want to highlight is that this book, presenting a holistic perspective on meaning-making of monuments, perfectly represents the limitations of previous research approaches to monuments. Viktorija. The overview of these limitations is finally crowned or summarized by this scheme.
Viktorija, we are not seeing the slides.
Yes, oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm trying to share.
We see your screen, but okay, now it's good. Can you move? Yeah, now it's good.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This scheme enables us to look at monuments from different perspectives. designers, users, context, intertext, combine semiotic, plastic, and figurative aspects, levels together with political intentions and messages. And in my opinion, such an analytical tool is very useful in interdisciplinary research, but at the same time, I see some risks. The plastic level requires good semiotic skills, semiotic professionalism. A political science researcher who is interested in reading monuments as political documents is often not a professional semiotician. So the question arises of what to do and how to do it. Günter Kress and Theo van Leeuwen analytical strategy for visual objects suggests that analysis of visual practices should not only focus on individual images, but also on certain syntax. That is not only what the image is analyzed, but how it's being talked about. And also what the historical, cultural, political context is that surrounds the image itself, which can help to construct a statement representing a specific meaning. So my analysis, usually conducted using the discourse analysis of documents and semiotic analysis of the discursive level of monuments in general and their figurative and thematic aspects in particular. Following Greimas, as we all know, there are three main levels of semiotic analysis: logico-semantic, narrative, and discursive. The biggest attention in my works, in my researches, is paid to the discursive level of semiotic analysis that is in turn divided into the figurative and thematic analytical levels. The figurative aspect is a unit of content of a monument that is related to the equivalent of the natural world in the plane of expression. The thematic dimension refers to the units of content that have no counterpart in the sensory world and the function through the constructs of the mind. It's important to note that combining figurative and thematic levels firstly indicate the form and visual grammar, and then based on the thematic values of the analyzed monuments, it follows to provide the content it is filled with. Following Roland Barthes, such distinction between the form and the content levels correspond to the semiologic system that links the figurative level with a signifier, while the thematic level may mark a signifier, thus creating a certain significant set. Having reviewed the figurative and thematic levels, in my analysis, the monuments are usually grouped by applying the principles of topological analysis. It should be noted that the development of the analytical strategy follows the effect of reality concept identified by Barthes because of the social realism style characteristic of monuments in Lithuania. Based on Barthes' explanation, the realistic tradition violates the phenomenal nature of science, followed by direct interface between an object and its expression. The absence of the signified and prioritizing only to the referent becomes the signifier of realism. It allows to reject the stage of signifier articulation implemented through its fragmentation into statistical discrete units. In other words, there is no necessity to ignore reference impression and limit the recognition of natural world figures. I want to emphasize that following, for example, Sergei Krug, that the importance of the referent in the semiotic analysis of social realism monuments by assuming that the aim of social realism and its work of art was not only to represent the reality, but also to be a social agent that corresponding with the reality. In this context, the analyzed monument is not divided into separate objects, and the main object of the semiotic analysis becomes the referent of the monument. And let's try to see what can be read by using semiotic tools and combining them with a common method in political science, discourse analysis. Let's take a closer look at the practice and a practical case. Public monuments, as we all know, are becoming more and more important as creators and representatives of state identity, not only in the academic area, but in public debates as well. Debates and disagreements about monuments in post-Soviet countries very often include questions related to the fate of monuments that have survived Soviet era. We could see the intensification of these discussions, these debates in the Baltic states after the start of the Russia-Ukrainian war very well. At the end of Soviet Empire, as well as at the beginning of the process of restoration of Lithuania's sovereignty, most of the Soviet heritage was dismantled. Soviet monuments were also taken from public spaces during the whole restoration of independence. However, there are still standing Soviet monuments, 11 of which are in Vilnius, in the capital city of Lithuania. If we look at the theoretical interpretations, we are able to see classical explanation developed by Forrest and Johnson. These authors stress that existing monuments can experience one of three possible fates during rare and significant critical junctures, such as collapse of Soviet Empire and the formation of liberal democracy. It could be co-opted or glorified, disavowed or contested. Co-opted or glorified monuments are maintained or further exalted. Disavowed sites are literally or symbolically erased from the landscape, either through active deconstruction or destruction. Contested monuments remain the object of political conflict and political debates. However, this classification of fates does not explain why some monuments remain and others are demolished. What is more, researchers in the field of Lithuanian art reveal that there are some constant aesthetic characteristics among monuments built in two different periods. There are some visual canons that can be observed in monuments built in Soviet era and post-Soviet period. While some material forms are replicated, a conservative image of massive heroes on pedestal prevails in monument despite the ideological differences of regimes that erected them. So if indeed there are some constant monumental forms, some constant monuments related to two political regimes, different political regimes, Soviet Empire and Lithuania after restored independence, what does that portend for political meanings? Do stable aesthetic forms mean stable political meanings or not? In order to answer these questions, the analysis of monuments standing in Vilnius, the capital city of Lithuania, was conducted. The strategy of analysis was composed, as I mentioned before, of the discourse analysis of existing documents and the semiotic analysis of discursive level of monuments. And let's begin with monuments built in Soviet Empire period and that are still standing in Vilnius. 11 monuments in Vilnius have survived the clash of the Soviet and democratic regimes or present political democracy, liberal democracy. The survived Soviet era monuments are presented now. Analysis showed that Soviet Empire monumental relicts can be grouped into the following three types: monuments representing the promotion of the Lithuanian language and culture, monuments depicting the founders of Lithuania in medieval times and monuments having changed meaning. 9 of 11 Soviet era monuments were built to commemorate writers and humanists. 6 monuments were dedicated to writers. 2 monuments were created to honor the representatives of Lithuanian culture. One of the Soviet era monument was devoted to Grand Duchess of Lithuania, who lived in 16th century, a golden period of the history of Lithuania. This monument marks a prominent figure in the creation process of the state of Lithuania. The last in the list of the survived Soviet era monuments is the monumental artifact, the first swallow, honoring the Soviet cosmonauts. This monument represents the group of monuments having a changed meaning. After the collapse of the Soviet Empire, it is associated with the first swallows of Lithuanian freedom in the period of restoration of independence of Lithuania. The initial meaning of that monument was altered with the change of regime and dominating political elite, and adapted to the new narrative of national identity as well. And to summarize the analysis of the Soviet era monuments, cultural and linguistic components prevail. And now let's look at 20 monuments built in the post-Soviet period, in the period of restored independence of Lithuania. Regarding the results of analysis, the following 6 types of monuments constructed in Vilnius after the restoration of independence of Lithuania can be distinguished. First group is monuments to the Lithuanian writers and humanists. The 4 monuments erected after the restoration of independence honor the Lithuanian writers and humanists, thus providing Lithuanian language and culture an appropriate role in the creation of national narrative through monuments. 5 monuments were devoted to foreigners who participated in the Lithuanian cultural life and historical events. The cultural and humanistic element is developed through monuments devoted to foreigners who promoted Lithuanian culture abroad. The third group, monuments to the founding fathers of the medieval Lithuania. The monuments to the Grand Duke Gediminas and King Mindaugas commemorate 2 medieval figures who laid the foundations for the origins of the Lithuanian states in the Middle Ages. Thematically and figuratively, they are related to images of Lithuanian origins and ancestry. 5 monuments to the founder of the First Republic of Lithuania established in the interwar period. The monuments of this group mark the practices of remembrance implemented through monuments and representing as well as involving the founders of the First Lithuania Republic in the narrative of national identity. The 5th group, monuments marking significant events of independent Lithuania's history. And the last group, monuments dedicated to the Jewish history. 5 of 20 monuments are associated with the Jewish history of Lithuania. In the process of grouping monuments built in the post-Soviet era period, 2 dominating narrative lines of national identity could be singled out. First, highlights the importance of Lithuanian language and culture. The second one, the construction of national identity through the search for the origins and ancestries. So, perceiving monuments as symbolic entry points in reading and interpreting the narrative of national identity in the case of monuments built in contemporary Vilnius, implicate political meanings with strong cultural connotations. If based on theoretical assumptions made at the beginning of the presentation, we perceive monuments as texts that develop a narrative revealing national identity and look for the answer to the question how we can account for both the continuities and the changes in Soviet era monuments and the ones erected in independent Lithuania. We can see characteristic features of both periods reflected in the monuments. These include not only aesthetic similarities, but similarities in terms of political meaning. Using the semiotic dictionary, we can use the search for relations of difference and similarity here. Considering monuments as states' identity practices, it's useful to look at the classical concept of identity. Anthony Smith, well-known British historical sociologist, introduced two concepts of national identity, political and ethnic concept of nation. Political nation is related to common laws and political institutions, while ethnic nations is seen as tracked down by native intellectuals having strong relationship with language and common origins and ancestry. In this context, the two classical concepts of the nation reveal the direction of the formation of meaning. Ethnic concept versus political concept of the nation. 10 of 11 Soviet period monuments that remain in the public spaces in Vilnius and still participate in constructing process of the narrative of national identity represent the significance of language and culture. If we look at these monuments from the perspectives of Smith's two concepts of national identity, we could notice that they have no links with the political concept of the nation. An analogous situation is noticed in the analysis of the post-Soviet monuments in Vilnius. Some certain connection with the political concept of the nation can be traced, but the ethnic concept of the nation take up a dominant position. Although the component representing national identity, the political concept of nation, is present in the monuments erected after the restoration of independence, it is eliminated from the Soviet monuments that are still standing in public places in Lithuania. What is related to the ethnic concept of nation in the national narrative becomes a factor explaining the aspects of monument stability that remains in spite of changes of political elites, regimes, discourses, and related to changes in monuments. Comparing the monumental artifacts of these two periods, the dominance of the Lithuanian language and culture became one of the most remarkable features. It explains the signs of aesthetic stability of monuments essential to their political relevance. Comparing the monuments of both periods, it's become clear that similar aesthetic and visual features of monuments built in the context of different political periods lead to the thematically overlapping monument values that are strongly interrelated in common political meaning. The dominance of the Lithuanian language and culture became one of the most remarkable features. So the answer, how can we account for the continuities in post-Soviet period monuments and monuments that are Soviet Empire legacy, is the importance of ethnicity developed through monuments and the ethnic concept of nation. So thank you very much for your attention and forgive me for not being a pure semiotician and bringing some elements of political science to the Semiosalong meetings. Thank you very much.
No. No, quite on the contrary, thank you. And yeah, it's always nice to have people coming from other places, and it's great. And so now we have some time for questions and answers. And yeah, so maybe people here or people in Zoom, maybe people from Tartu. No questions from here. If not, I would like to maybe ask one question, but it would be, okay, first let's go to Pauline, and then I will ask my question.
Sorry, we had a bit of problem with the different emote. It was about the fate that the sculpture can have. So you say disvowed, contested, or glorified. I know that in France we have this, I would say, option that they can be also recontextualized, because we have a very long history of people trying to kill each other on very different way for very different aspect. But we also loved a lot of our old statues, for example, only for the art aspect. Mm-hmm. But to have this art aspect without the context or with a different context, we moved them in museum, for example, in history museum. So do you also observe this kind of phenomenon, or maybe is it too early? Because I'm thinking of statues that are centuries right now. So did you also see that in Vilnius in the Soviet statues, or is it, you think, too early, or what happened?
In Lithuania, we have a very good example of this case that you mentioned, of monuments that were felt deconstruction, and now they are in a park called Grūtas Park. There are very wide exposition of Soviet monuments. It's very important that in that park, in that place, the aesthetics of social realism is very important, and it's art aspect of art, of aesthetics. But looking from political position, from political sides, these monuments do not have any political connotations. It's just depoliticized place where Soviet monuments now are exhibited.
Yeah. So it's also the same that we have with museum, but in park, it's finding a neutral ground to expose it. Okay. Okay, thank you.
But we have a wide discussions about this park. Is it good? Is it bad? I think that the same situation is in all post-Soviet countries.
Yeah. And do you think that this discussion, I would say, is maybe more open right now, that we can have that because it's simply more recent? Right now we have, a lot of statues of our kings, for example, in France. Almost nobody is for monarchy anymore, but still we are conservative. The political value is almost completely done. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's also because we had a lot of history before this period right now. So do you think that it's a discussion still ongoing because it's quite young? Or
Yes. I absolutely agree with your opinion. It's too young question, and we have some questions related to Soviet period, to the memory of Soviet period that are still do not answered. So that's the reason, I think.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. So we have a question in the chat, and Ron, would you like to speak up, or we can just read your question?
Yes, about the minority groups. This case is about paid the biggest attention to monuments related to Soviet period and post-Soviet period. So minority groups is not a question of that group, but of that research, of that presentation. But yes, of course, we have monuments that are related to minority group, especially to Jewish legacy, to Jewish memory, to Holocaust memory. It's very, very, very important minority group in the in the formation of the narrative about Lithuania and about Lithuania as a state. I see the second question in the chat about the difference between identity and memory. I want, in my opinion, it's important to say that it's not the same. We are talking about the state and its identity, and it's related to the question, what is a state? But memory comes here to this situation because we need to have ways, we need to have practices through which we can understand what is a state identity. So collective memory practices I see as medias through which state's identity is created.
Thank you. And actually that was related to what I wanted to ask, because this notion of identity, I think, seems to be at play both in this presentation and in Heidi's presentation. So, because it seems as if in some way monuments could serve a similar role than to sort of ascribe oneself to some beliefs as the, well, flat earth. Or so yeah, I thought that that was a nice connection there. Maybe it was more a comment than a question, but yeah, good. But,
yes, we can see some similarities between.
Yeah, that's very nice. So I would like to thank you again, Viktorija, very much. And yes, we can now go to our last presentation. And yeah,